Okay, so welcome back to my final installment on IPMI here at Steve's Basement. And what I'm going to do is go through the 12 steps. IPMI is a 12-step program that I did in order to get it up and running. So it starts from configuring the BIOS to enabling drivers to configuring the BMC, then to making sure your ARP tables are set up right, and then finally configuring the grub and the init tab in order to get the proper serial output. And this all has to be done in less than 10 minutes, so it all fits in a single YouTube video slot. Anyway, so I'm going to point you at my console screen and we'll continue from there. Okay. Okay, so I've got you guys looking at my my root console, or my root X terminal here on my on server 0. And what I'll do is I'll show you the various things that I did on this machine in order to get IPMI up and running. First of all, you have to go into the BIOS and make sure that the console is redirected to the serial overland output. So that's something you have to do in the BIOS. I'm not going to go through that because that's going to be personal for any BIOS or whatever server you've got. So that needs to be configured. The other thing that I had to do for the Intel board was configure the IPMI users using the Intel motherboard CD that came with the motherboard. You boot off of it, you boot into this application, and then it steps you through the various steps to configuring users for IPMI. The BMC, or the software infrastructure for IPMI, has a user interface. You can define up to 16 users. All you need is one user with admin privileges. Set the password accordingly, username, password accordingly, and it's pretty straightforward just to walk through the menus. But anyway, so now once you've got that set up, then what you do is you want to make sure that the OpenPMI RPM packages are set up. So I'm running a Red Hat 5.2. This is probably very similar on the Fedora 10. So I believe just about everything I'm doing here will apply directly to Fedora 10. But anyway, if I want to take a look at the packages installed, when I say IPMI, you'll see I've got the Open PMI, the libs, the package, and the tools. And the tools has the Open PMI tool, which is the application you're going to use to do a lot of the configuration. Once you're sure that those packages are installed, you want to go over and check the init script, pcrc.init.d, and here if you type IPMI status, you'll see that let me move this up a little bit. You'll see that the drivers are loaded. So this IPMI initialization, this service script, needs to be started at boot time. So if you do check config list of IPMI, you'll see that it's enabled to come up at boot time. So that needs to be enabled. If it's not enabled, enable it, start it up. You can do an IPMI start, hit return, and that should go off and load the drivers for the first time. And that was pretty much it to get that thing going. The next thing is, I'm checking my cheat sheet over here. At this point, you can actually now start talking to the BMC, this little onboard controller computer that sits inside the motherboard. So the best way to do that, I like, is the IPMI tool shell. That puts you into this IPMI tool shell, and then you can start issuing commands from here. So BMC info then comes off and it gives you information about the BMC itself, and you see it's an Intel Corporation. It runs 2.0, etc., etc. So the fact that I was able to do this tells me that the drivers are loaded and I'm talking to the BMC. Okay, so then what you need to do is do some, there's three areas of configuration. You have to configure the SOL, the serial over LAN. You have to configure the LAN itself and then the user list, right? So there's three commands you can use. One is SOL info. That basically dumps out information about the serial over LAN. The important things to notice here are the bit rates. I would set those bit rates to the same bit rates that you set in the BIOS. Again, one thing I forgot to say is when you go through and you set up the redirect of the console to the serial output to the serial over LAN, one thing you have to do is specify the baud rate. So I set this baud rate to be the same as what was in the BIOS. The other thing I did is in the BIOS is I set the hardware flow control on, and that seems to work a lot better when you have the hardware flow control on. So that's the SOL info command. The other useful command is the LAN print 1. This actually prints out information about the LAN, the network adapter that goes with this onboard computer. Here you can see I've set the critical items are the IP address and the subnet mask. The MAC address is already set for you. You want to take note of that because you need to put that into your ARP table. And then the other thing I did is I set up my gateway and the gateway MAC. I don't think you really need to set those, right? And then finally there is a user list 1 command, and what this does is dump out the list of users that are allowed to connect to the serial over LAN or to the the interface itself over the network. And here what you can see is you have up to 16 different users. You only need one. I played around with some testing on some other ones. But it was hard to set these various parameters using the IPMI tool, so I used the BIOS utility, or that boot utility, the configuration utility that Intel provided on the DVD that you boot off of. Anyway, so that's that. Okay, so you need to go through and then do the following. You have to set the LAN, so you have to set the parameters for the network card. You do that by issuing the LAN set 1 IP address. Well, if you do this, if you type LAN set 1 and you hit return, you'll get all the various parameters that you want to set, that you can set with the for the LAN.